2010 figures to be a monumental year for Iraq. In the north, tensions mount as Kurds and Arabs fuel an old feud. Will this pivotal year lead to civility or civil war? If Kirkuk is a battleground, then the prize lays beneath us. Experts estimate that up to 25% of Iraq's oil is here. That's enough of a natural resource bonanza to fuel an independent Kurdistan, a fact that both Erbil and Baghdad are both keenly aware of. And with neither side willing to compromise, Kirkuk may very well be the fault lines that Iraq's future depends on. These days, it's often police, not military, who find themselves on the forward edge of a frontless war. Such as these highly militarized cops preparing to raid 3 Arab villages south of the city in Kirkuk province. As calls for morning prayer break the night silence, dogs announce our arrival. Police set up a staging area in the village schoolyard, while all the men in the village are roused from their homes and brought to wait in line. Every male must present his national identification card to be checked against a list of most wanted names before being cleared to return to his family. This morning, 4 men aren't so lucky. One is apprehended when his name is found to be a direct match to the list. 3 others are brought in without warrants for their arrest based on partial name matches. Today's mission happens without incident for the police, but they tell us it's far from the norm. Iraq? Kurdistan. 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 Kurdistan?
Yes, Iraq.
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 Iraq. Why?
Why Iraq?
Kirkuk should be part of Iraq. We have all lived like brothers here, Kurd, Arab, and Turkmen. We would like to continue living that way.
As with everything in Iraq, there are always more than 2 sides to every story. To add to the complexity of the Arabs and Kurds in Kirkuk, a sizable population of Turkmen maintain close relations to Turkey, whose economic and military clout looms over much of what happens here. And each faction believes it has history on its side. The Turkmen point to when the Ottoman Empire ruled here, which is true.
We know the most of lands of Kirkuk belongs to the Turkmens, and we didn't see any period in the history that Kirkuk was some part of Kurdistan.
Because they're all Iraqi, Kirkuk belongs to Iraq, which is true, as long as Kurdistan stays a part of Iraq.
Since we became occupied, we got divided into this province and that province. Kirkuk is Iraqi. We will never compromise over it. It will never go to another province.
The dispute has taken center stage in a larger collision of forces that's now being called the trigger line. From Syria to Iran, Iraqi army forces are positioned across from Kurdish security forces called Peshmerga.
All along this trigger line, there have been incidents, any one of which could have triggered a larger conflagration. And the only reason why it didn't was because both sides recognized that this was not what they wanted at that time.
Kurdish leaders are quick to remind people of the horrors of Halabja. In fact, Kurdish leaders so frequently used the cause of Halabja that locals became frustrated with being the poster children for Kurdish suffering, while at the same time not receiving any support to rebuild their town. In 2007, they rioted and burned down the memorial built for the tragedy. Do you believe that Maliki wants to restore a dictatorship in Iraq?
I don't want you to ask this question again.
Driving through Kirkuk, it's easy to see how the city is changing. Waves of Kurds have been moving into Kirkuk since 2003. For long stretches, recently built gray concrete homes pop up everywhere. They're visual testimony of the city's shifting demographics. Many Arab and Turkmen see the Kurds' mass migration as a political maneuver, an attempt at a demographic takeover. They claim many more Kurds are returning than have ever lived here before.
We challenge all those who make such accusations against the Kurds. If they find one extra Kurd or any non-Kirkuki Kurd living there, we will take responsibility for it. I can assure you that 40% of those Kurds which were expelled from Kirkuk are still living in Suleymaniye and Erbil and have not gone back. These are false accusations against us.
They brought these people to vote yes in the referendum.
The referendum was part of an Iraqi constitutional measure that called for Kirkukis to vote on joining Kurdistan or remaining part of central Iraq. When Kurds started moving into the city by the tens of thousands, and some claim hundreds of thousands, the debate came about who should be able to vote. Some criticized the Kurdistan Regional Government's aggressive repatriation program.
They are doing things that are not as so nice to some of these Kurds, because some of these Kurds don't want to go back, or at least not now. If they are employed in the civil service in Erbil or Sulaymaniyah, for example, their jobs may be transferred to Kirkuk, and they have no choice but to move, at least during the day. If they have children born to them, they are being forced to register these children in Kirkuk. If they want to buy land in Sulaymaniyah, they're not allowed to do so.
I think for the Kurds, Kirkuk important because the Kirkuk's oil and the Kirkuk gas. It is an economic sources to the KRG. The Kirkuk, it will be a very important strategic value for the KRG.
You mean for an independent KRG?
Yes, yes.
The Peshmerga, which means ready to die, were born from a fighting unit of the Ottoman Empire. The U.S. military is battling this deficit of trust by establishing new trilateral checkpoints along the trigger line, run by units from both sides with oversight by Americans. But not everyone's so keen about having a Kurdish military presence in northern Iraq. Sunni politicians have made a recent comeback in the province of Nineveh, partially due to their outspoken opposition to the Kurdish presence there. Security forces are escorting us into the city of Mosul. Mosul's the capital of the Nineveh province and is one of the most violent cities in Iraq right now. Much of the violence in Mosul is attributed to recent ethnically driven politics. Mosul has a majority Sunni population, but because Sunnis boycotted the 2005 elections in protest to the U.S. occupation, the government was controlled by the minority Kurds. Then in provincial elections last year, Sunni candidates ran and won on a strong anti-Kurd platform. In response, Kurdish politicians rejected the results and are refusing to participate in a coalition government.
The Kurdish political parties and the Kurdish coalition, I am not convinced they comprehend the change. It is hard for those in power to give up authority and to relinquish their agenda that came after the occupation of Iraq. They must accept the results of the election and the results of democracy.
The governor of Nineveh province, Adil al-Nujayfi, has been outspoken in his opposition to the joint checkpoint idea. Once the Peshmerga establish their presence beyond the accepted border of Kurdistan, he says they won't want to leave.
We believe that this is part of the greater Kurdistan agenda. They know that there cannot be a state created in the areas where they are now because of the weakness of its economic resources, its lack of geographical interconnectedness, and lack of access to a seaport. For that reason, they have a dream of a greater Kurdistan. They have plans for that.
The governor of Mosul said he does not want the Iraqi army to patrol jointly with the Peshmerga. He has no interest in that. What's your response to him on that issue?
Our agreement is with the Baghdad government and also with the U.S. military. We have not and we will not talk to the governor of the Nineveh province. We will not recognize his decision, and his decisions will not be implemented on the ground.
The balance of power in this area is known. The Iraqi Arab side was at its weakest point after the occupation and now is starting to gradually regain its power. I'm sure that the Kurdish leaders will reassess the situation in light of the new power facing them.
Worried about what the Kurds will do in the face of this new power, U.S. military commanders have proposed leaving 20,000 troops in northern Iraq, while forces around the rest of the country withdraw. As the U.S. military pulls out, it's handing over increased security responsibilities, not only to the Iraqi army, but also to the local police, who face constant danger. We're rolling with the Kirkuk police today in a joint patrol with the U.S. military. Tensions are high. A half hour before we arrived, 2 police officers were gunned down in the streets. The last time we met with the Kirkuk police, there was an attack that killed 3 bodyguards of a police commander and another police officer. This kind of violence is a daily occurrence here and is one of many things that could undermine the upcoming elections. Leading the operation is Police Brigadier General Sahar Kader. He was once the police chief in the Kurdish city of Erbil, but moved to Kirkuk after 2003. He doesn't hide the fact that he came here to secure the city for the Kurds.
When we were Peshmergas in the 80s, our goal was to change the regime in order to gain our rights. When America and the Allied nations removed the previous regime, we came back to our city to save what we had left. Kirkuk is a city the Kurds shed a river of blood for. This is a fact that cannot be denied.
They're visiting the sheikh of a Sunni village in the Kirkuk province. It's a chance to smoke, drink tea, and talk about security preparations for the upcoming elections. This house call is also an attempt to mend fences after the U.S. detained and released the sheikh without charges. Beyond the walls of the meeting, and the shadows of the heavily armed police and U.S. soldiers, villagers were eager to talk about their perspective on the status of Kirkuk.
The Kurds say this is Kurdistan. Historically, this is Kurdistan.
Impossible. Impossible. In actuality, this is Iraqi land, not Kurdish or Arab. The Kurd is living in Baghdad, living in Ramadi, living in Samarra, living in all the provinces of Iraq. We have the right to live anywhere inside Iraq we want, not just here. If we reside inside, we have the right.
These men echoed a similar sentiment that's common in these Arab communities, brutality at the hands of Kurdish security forces.
Inside the village, it's fine. If people go to the administrative seat of the province, they don't come back. The president of our legislative council was killed on the street here. He and his son were killed. The parties nailed him. The Kurdish parties assassinated him.
Stories of assassinations, kidnappings, and intimidation are commonplace here. Sunnis claim it's a concerted campaign to force Arabs out of Kirkuk. Kidnappings have become so endemic that Kirkuk has created an official committee to look into them. Ramla Hamid Al-Ubaidi has investigated hundreds of disappearances.
The number of parents that have come to us in the northern area are in the range of 600 to 800. What I mean by kidnapping is that arrests are made unofficially and illegally. They might come to the door of someone's home, posing as an official of the government, and take him.
My son, a soldier, was on the main road to Kirkuk. We were waiting for him to come home on vacation, April 12, 2009. But he never arrived.
Witnesses say that Abdullah's 17-year-old son, Man, was stopped in his car by Kurdish intelligence officers and taken away. The family claims they've been extorted for thousands of dollars seeking information about where their son is being held.
We're going through tough and sad times. We lost our son and our monetary support as well. We're still not sure of where he is, what he was accused of, and when he'll be let go. I got diabetes and high blood pressure, and his mother has suffered from difficulty breathing after the kidnapping.
In Suleymaniya, we actually visited a prison. By chance, the committee entered one of the halls, and I asked, who among you has family that doesn't know where you are? Quickly, 4 people raised their hands, so we recorded their names. Then they realized that they were being observed somehow and became all quiet. I contacted their families, and one of them had been lost for 6 months, and his family had no idea where he was.
I think that the Kurds, by and large, have not engaged in the kind of violence that, let's say, the former regime used in expelling the Kurds. The Kurds have used subtler methods, but they have a similar impact, which is the departure of Arabs from Kirkuk.